right, welcome to the Roberta Randolph Show. I am Roberta Randolph, your host and your interviewer. This evening, we are going to be having a discussion on Zoom. Zoom because you all know what is happening these days. So if you are seeing some changes on the screen and you are not actually seeing what you are used to see on my show all the time, I like to apologize, but I also like to let you know that it's a Zoom meeting. And so we're going to be having a Zoom meeting for quite some time, but as well, we will also be having, our regular discussion. Today, my guest, Pastor Robert Akron. I would like him to do a very brief introduction of himself. Our topic for this evening, forces that shape our destiny. I'd like Pastor Robert to introduce himself and also to also let you know that we have been looking at this topic for the past couple of months. And some of you asked some few questions that we are going to dive in today. And some of your questions are whether that, and I don't want to go too deep into it now, but we will get there. And this is actually a part 2 of the discussion we have done previously, forces that shape our destiny. My guest again, Pastor Robert Akron. Pastor, you are welcome.
Thank you, Roberta.
Pastor, please, for the sake of our audience and for those that are joining us now, I want us to do a recap on forces that shape our destiny. During the moment we were having that discussion, you mentioned certain specific forces that shape our destiny. One, you talk about beauty, aesthetics, which is beauty, and you talk about, I think you mentioned on some education and certain aspect of things, but I wouldn't want to grab those things from your mouth. I'll have you to really do a recap on that, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yes, the last time we dealt with this topic, forces that shape destiny, I used the Bible as my source, precisely from the book of Daniel, chapter 1. And in that text, the Bible makes us to understand that Nebuchadnezzar had come to attack Israel. And this type of warfare was a siege warfare. And after some time, Jehoiakim gave up. And Nebuchadnezzar took him and took some of the princes of Judah to Babylon. And the Bible makes an interesting statement there that it was God who gave Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Gave. So the question became, here was Nebuchadnezzar who harnessed his resources, had his motivations for doing what he did, traveling over 1,000 miles to come and besiege Jerusalem with superior forces, only to be told the victory he chalked actually was an outcome that God gave. It was determined by God. And that's an interesting statement. We also realize that when he took the princes of Judah back to Babylon, he did something strange too. These princes were now effectively slaves. But the Bible said Nebuchadnezzar called this for certain attributes in them. One of them was beauty. The other was wisdom, knowledge, understanding of science, and the ability to stand in the corridors of power. These were attributes the king asked for. And so those people, if they were found to have these attributes, were going to be trained to become, let's say, elites within the setup of Babylon. And so we made the point that, yes, if we look at it carefully, human beings played out what human beings would normally play out, but the outcome was predetermined by God. So God is a force that shapes destinies. We also looked at other forces. We made mention of education. We make mention of individual ambition. So today, what the popular request came in for was, could the individual also shape his destiny? And that's what we are here for.
All right. And so until we get to that point, I want us to go now. And I know you are a pastor, so obviously you are going to take a lot of your conversation from the Bible. But I also do understand and know that you are also a historian, you are also a network engineer, you are also a lawyer. So having picked up this conversation from the biblical standpoint, do we have some of these things in our contemporary world where any data explaining that some forces are shaping those destinies or have shaped those destinies?
Yes. I mean, let's look at the developed world, right?
Of course.
One of the things we see is high literacy rate, and high literacy rate leading to a vastly improved standard of living as compared to other places. So education is vital in shaping destinies of individuals, of communities, and even countries. Just the same thing Nebuchadnezzar asked for. Because he said those children who had been captured, who were effectively slaves at this time, if they had superior knowledge, if they had superior understanding, superior wisdom, if they had the ability to operate in the centers of power, then they were going to be transitioned from just slaves to the elites in Babylon. What else could one say? This was an interesting thing that played out there, and it's playing out now.
Absolutely.
One indicator of a developed place is the level of literacy. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much. So in that story that you narrated from the book of, the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, we realized that all of a sudden, it was not specifically Nebuchadnezzar shaping the destiny of the lives of these specific people, but that God, the Bible said, God gave.
Yeah.
So the word give presupposes that it wasn't a person actually having it, but another force was there giving it, which means some specific forces behind the scene orchestrating all of these things.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, so if these things are playing out in our everyday lives, does one have any kind of ability to reshape their destiny to a particular desirable direction?
Yes, indeed. Even from that text, as I said, these children have been captured. They were slaves. Their destinies are changed. From that, at one time, they were princes in their country, Judah, in Jerusalem. And then they have been captured, slaves. But because of something they had, the education they had, the conqueror wanted to change their destiny from that of conquered people and effectively slaves to become big shots within the administrative setup of Babylon. So yes, education can shape the individual's destiny. So in our contemporary world, all things being equal, the more education one has, the more likely that one will earn enough or more than the other without equal or similar education.
Right.
So yes, education, a force that played out in the ancient world, still plays out in shaping destinies in our contemporary world.
Thank you. Let's look at some other avenues or criteria or other things that. So apart from education, what other ways by which an individual can shape their destiny?
Okay, nature could shape your destiny. A country may be resourced, right? And as a result, may have the certain abilities in terms of finance and what have you, developmental projections and what have you, simply because of nature's deposits, like mineral resources. One could also be the child of wealthy parents, and just the accident of birth could put one in a more privileged, more advantageous position than somebody else.
So
So
then,
life has that sort of complication.
thank you so much. Let's look at other people, so let's look at the less fortunate. For
Okay.
example, those that don't have education, those that don't have even access to education. And then we have those that education may not be their thing, and those that may not have been born in a privilege. We have people that are refugees, right? We have people that come from underprivileged backgrounds. If somebody is listening to us right now and saying, well, I don't have the educational background, I wasn't born in a well-privileged kind of environment. For example, I wasn't born as one of the princes or the queens of England, where I was born into wealth or something like that. So how then do I have the advantage in order to be, in comparison with the rest of them?
Okay. This is one of the interesting things of life. I am a pastor, so I believe everybody has a talent.
Okay.
So talent, as we observed in part one, could do wonders. And talent doesn't have to be necessarily in the form of education. And I gave the example of Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was born into not so privileged environment or to parents, but because of his talent as a basketball player, Michael Jordan is today a billionaire. So talent, in whatever form it comes, if properly harnessed, can work wonders for the individual. Talents like musical talents and what have you can change people's destinies. The whole take it, work it, sharpen it, and then put it to use.
Thank you so much. I want us to start looking at, these attributes in a more broader, larger scale.
Okay.
A country can also be directed in a negative direction, or a particular country can be directed by certain specific forces. And I'm talking in terms of, we are in the COVID era and a lot is going on right now. Okay. And we are seeing that certain specific countries are doing well in terms of how they handle the COVID, in terms of death mortality rate, and even how people are getting infected with the COVID as compared to other parts of the world. Would you say that destiny is shaping these specific countries?
Yes. To a very great extent, right? Let's take example, the country we live in, America. How many people are now out of work? And simply because of the COVID, right? COVID becomes a destiny shaper. In fact, when it started, over 40 million people lost their jobs. And as we speak, over a quarter of them still don't have jobs. And it's been almost 7 months now. Destinies have been changed. America alone, in the second quarter, the economy shrank by 32.9%. That is destiny shaping. America's destiny was shaped. And it's been shaped by this COVID. Some lives have been lost, over 200,000. Their destinies shaped for eternity. Talk of Europe. Talk of Asia. Countries are still smattering under the weight of this COVID menace. So yes, natural disasters could shape destinies. So the individual, the community, and nations could be shaped by nature.
As you were, talking, I was thinking about a lot of things, in reference to what you are talking about. I quite remember when Katrina took place here in Louisiana, and I saw how a lot of people start migrating from Louisiana to certain specific directions, within the country. I also saw that certain businesses began to relocate itself to other places. Destiny were being shaped. I also do remember, certain kind of earthquakes that has taken place in Haiti, and how it devastatingly changed the lives of even young children.
Yeah.
And I also saw some Americans even went and adopted kids and brought them to the United States. So definitely destiny do shape our lives. But in terms of the COVID-19 right now, there was a response that came from the BBC News of England.
Okay.
And the report was that, and I will paraphrase here, the report was that Africa, the CDC did mention that Africa is going, this was the initial stage of the COVID. And it did mention that Africa is going to, and I paraphrase, the streets of Africa will be flooded with lives of human beings affected by the COVID. This was the beginning of the COVID-19. Now we are in the 7th month now. And if any country has done and dealt so well with the COVID, we are seeing that Africa have less people, less death mortality rate. Not too many are affected by the COVID. So what is the secret behind here? What can one say in terms of what we're talking about and what is happening right now with the COVID-19 in Africa, in the world, and how Africa is responding in response to how the Western world are responding to the COVID?
It's one of the interesting revelations. I also read where they said that actually the streets of Africa will be littered with dead bodies, and the recommendation and as to the success or tragedy was that for a country to manage it and have some good results, high literacy rates, the level of infrastructure, the level of scientific understanding were going to be very crucial in determining how effectively a country was going to manage the COVID in terms of good results. And the idea was that Africa happens to be the least developed of the continents. and therefore its countries were going to be at the receiving end of this COVID menace. Unfortunately, Africa has outperformed every continent. The whole of Africa, with a population of 1.3 billion people, hasn't registered 40,000 deaths. The whole of Africa. Italy, with just about under 50 million, has over 30,000 deaths. France, with a population of 67 million, has about 32,000 deaths. Spain, about 42 million people, has over 30,000. Then Great Britain, with 66 million, has over 40,000. Then come to the United States, with 330 million people, has over 200,000. These are developed countries. So what is happening here? Is COVID trying to tell us that we have to revisit our indices and our indicators of development? We don't know yet. But I think the COVID is forcing us to revisit the data and to revisit our thinking of who and who is not developed. That's what I can say about this COVID for now. But as to what Africa did or is doing to chalk such results, that will be for another time.
I like that conversation, that statement. So who is actually developed? And for so long, we have, we have known Africa to be labeled underdeveloping country. Well, the COVID is telling us that it takes more than just being underdeveloped to handle the COVID.
Yeah.
Because of the medical issues and medical conversations that we have had. It means that we can't just treat the COVID anyhow, because we learn about mutations. We learn about, taking vitamins. We learn about certain things that are very medical that must be done to treat the COVID. Mm-hmm. However, Africa is labeled to be an underdeveloped world. Mm-hmm. And if Africa is labeled to be an underdeveloped world, we are seeing that the results are saying something completely different.
Yes.
So the question I want to ask is, I know that, and I have to be very specific here, who is winning the war of the COVID? Are we saying that, and whoever is winning the war of the COVID, can we now project and say that, well, who is the next superpower in terms of what we are seeing now?
That's an interesting, very interesting angle to come from. Let's put certain things in context. We are talking about the forces that shape destiny, right?
Absolutely.
Isn't it amazing and interesting, and certainly no coincidence, that as we speak right now, Nigerians are the most educated group of people in America, and the same thing in the UK. Nigerians, Africans. So, if the original projection as to how the COVID was going to be managed, and the original projection was high literacy rate, and it so happens that Nigerians are the most educated, Ghanaians are not far off, Kenyans are not far off in America and in the UK. Could the data be telling us something different than what we've assumed or we've determined to be the case?
And if that's the case, then what are some of the things that data can show us?
Well, the
That
data
makes us start to think that way.
is clear, Roberta. The data is very clear. It's been over 6 months now. The whole of Africa hasn't registered 40,000 deaths. So, what is happening? And the point is, I am making this argument that if the literacy rate of Africans in the most developed country, which is the US, and arguably the second most developed, which is the UK, the group of people that one would say are more educated happened to be Africans. So yes, their very projection is being proven right, but not in the way one would have thought. Yes, higher education could be a game changer. And Africans are highly educated in this Western world. Could it be that is the same thing back home? And so the point is, are we using the wrong parameters? Are we using the wrong indices? Are we using the wrong indicators and metrics to determine development? Who is developed and who is not? Does our literature need to change? Do we need to change our levels? Do we certainly have to revisit the data and recalibrate our language to capture what is really happening? And so, if that is going to be the yardstick for who is going to be the next superpower, in fact, Roberta, last year, the Standard Chartered Bank, arguably the largest bank in the world, released a report. This was pre-COVID. And the report said by 2030, China was going to be the dominant economic power, at least, with GDP of $64 trillion, followed by India, not the US, followed by India with $46 trillion. Then the US will be 31 trillion. So this report said in 10 years' time, China will have twice the economic wealth of America, 64 trillion. So, one of the interesting things out of it is that these are heavily populated countries, China and India. And they also happen to be very educated countries. So, could this COVID also be saying something? If Africa has managed this COVID so well, and Africans are the most educated in America and in UK. Nigeria, which is the most educated, Nigerians who are the most educated in America, Nigeria also has population. So, could a case be made for at least Nigeria that if Nigeria puts its house in order and really starts taking the necessary steps, Nigeria, and for that matter Africa, may be the dark horse in this race for the next superpower? That's a thought.
You know, We have a lot to think about, and I think we should revisit this topic because there's so much that we can derive out of this to really know what's happening around us. But I want to talk about a couple of things here. The COVID certainly has changed how we do things, how we govern, how we run politics, how we rule our world, how we go to school, how we do everything. And we are seeing that, during this era, there's a lot of countries that are going to be running election. America is about to start its elections and pretty soon here in November. And most of the time, history have told us that whatever may be happening at a particular time do shape our political world.
Mm.
Right now, everybody's looking at America.
Mm-hmm.
There is a chase for the COVID vaccine. There is a chase for remedy for the COVID, the COVID-19 that we are all experiencing. The world is chasing an answer to end this pandemic.
Okay.
The entire world is. But we also do know that since America is a superpower now, the world is really looking at America since when it first entered here in March, precisely somewhere, I think maybe January, but I think it started actually really here in somewhere March.
Mm-hmm.
We are in September now, going into October. We haven't come up with a vaccine yet. Now, all of these is happening whilst elections are going on around the world. Suddenly, we have a Democratic ticket in which a woman is running for a woman has been asked to be on a ticket for the Democratic vice president, a woman. It has never happened in American history.
Mm.
We also realized that during the COVID, even though we all know that we were told that we have to start doing social distancing, and we have to have our masks on, our gloves on, and we have to use our hand sanitizers. We saw an incident that took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in which George Floyd died.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of this controversy started a huge riot around the world.
Yeah.
In the midst of the COVID, what can we say? We are still talking about forces that shape destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we are seeing all of these things happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
A woman is on a ticket
Mm-hmm.
to run for the next the next election coming up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have a COVID-19 going on.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking around the world and saying, where is the answer coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are looking at other places. Majority of people are looking at, if I'm correct, at the Western world. I don't think much people are really thinking about Africa because of the labeling that is an underdeveloped world.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, this issue pertaining to Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we are also talking about Africa being projected to, Africa, haven't done so well in the midst of the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter is not different. These are descendants of slaves from Africa.
Yeah.
These are descendants from Africa.
Okay.
At the same time, Ghana, West Africa just celebrated 400 years of return.
Mm-hmm.
A year marking the time when slaves were taken from Africa to the United States. We are in the midst of a COVID era.
Okay.
How do we put all of these happening at the same time to make sense?
Okay. It's one of those things. I mean, as you rightly said, different forces coming together to shape these destinies of people, of communities, and of countries, and even the whole world in very significantly important ways. And it's a bit overwhelming. Yes, we don't yet have a vaccine for this COVID, but at least it's not as ravaging as it first was. So it's like countries have gotten a handle one way or the other. And with respect to a vaccine coming, that is a given. It will happen. When? Maybe we don't know, but whether it will happen, yes, we do know it will happen. And then, of course, this agitation, Black Lives Matter, what is causing it? Yes, you made the right call that these are descendants of Africa. So what is the relationship here? It's one of those things that, for no specific reasons, certain things will just boil over. And it may look like no specific antecedents or no specific causes led to what we are experiencing. But racism has been here for as long as slavery has been here. And the lack of seriousness in addressing the sins and the evils of racism is what we are witnessing. They call it lack of good faith with respect to what was done to erase the negative picture that racism wrought is also one of the reasons we are here. Of course, you are dealing with human beings. Certain people benefited from the imbalance of some people being denied a seat at the table, though their labor was used to build this country. And humans have the tendency to cling on to whatever advantages they have. And so that's what we are looking at. And of course, the oppressed will always look for the day they could undo the oppression. And so the George Floyd incident was, call it, the last straw. So the causes were there. Only they were not spelled out as one would like them to be, but they were there. And interestingly enough, this time you have young non-black people also being part of it. That makes it very interesting. So let's see how things play out. And then the all important election. And of course, what just happened with this Supreme Court vacancy, that makes for a very interesting election. I'm not going to say anything per se, but again, we are looking at forces beyond the control of humans, shaping the destiny of humans. And let's see how everything finally plays out.
It has been very interesting. You are watching the Roberta Randolph Show. I am Roberta Randolph. My guest, Pastor Robert Akron, has been amazing. We've been looking at forces that shapes our destiny. We've talked about the COVID era. We've looked at who is running, who is winning the war of what? The superpower. We haven't projected to say that, Africa is going to be the superpower, but we are seeing certain things that put Africa in a particular position that I think the world will get to know that Africa possesses something that we have marginalized for so long. As to whether it's going to be the superpower, we don't know. But we know that Africa do have some of the criteria that makes a country a superpower. Africa have education. Africa have population. Africa has some kind of resources. We have gold, we have diamonds. Africa have certain abilities that, according to Pastor Robert, when we look at the book of Daniel, that Daniel requested, that he said is still playing, education is still playing a big part in our contemporary world. To be able to rise up above, you got to be educated. And so, Pastor Robert, I want us to start thinking about, the fact that now that we see that Africa has projected a certain image that the world didn't know in terms of how it has handled the COVID, how is Africa now supposed to embody itself in order to present itself to the world that this is who I am? In other words, Africa, you have the chance.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do? How do you do it?
Yeah, certainly the African now has to live consciously. One, the African must rise and must also recognize that he has something. The African may not be able to articulate exactly what it is, but the data is showing that Africa, you have something the world may not have. Use it as your bargaining chip. You've done far more, far better than any continent. And our contemporary data is saying that you are in a position to surprise the world. Take the necessary steps. Make sure you choose the right leaders. You put visionaries in place. Be pragmatic and go big. Don't fall prey to this easy preference for outside help. You have what it takes to be bigger than anybody has thought about you. Go for it.
Thank you, Pastor Robert. You've been watching the Roberto Randolph Show. We have been looking at forces that shapes our destiny. Pastor Robert, before we go, we have, I want us to, can you just for a second, and I know you've talked to, you just said something to the African man, but I also want you to specifically say certain words to certain specific African leaders as to looking back about some of the things that we have done as Africans that has not helped the country. Okay, and then looking forward, what are some ways by which we can embrace the new results that we know about the COVID and how it has handled itself in terms of where we need to go?
Yeah, traditionally, Africa has been a raw material producer. Africa transitioned from that, become finished products maker. Go heavy into research. You have the brain power. Don't cheapen yourselves. Use whatever you have. Yes, the COVID, we don't know what specifically Africa did to have the sort of results, but you did something. And that is right now the challenge, to find out what exactly positioned you. And then take off with whatever findings you make. Because whether it is culture, whether it is education, whether it is your spirituality or whatever, it has proved, call it efficacious. it has proved effective. And so, do whatever you need to do. You have what it takes. Do your homework well. Go into research and industrialize.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Pastor Robert. Before we go, and our time is up, you've been watching the Roberta Randolph Show. Please look for us on WhatsApp, look for us on Facebook, look for us on Instagram, all social media. This episode is playing on CCS Media, Channel 12. Sorry about that, CCS Media, Brooklyn Park. I am the Roberta Randolph Show. I host the Roberta Randolph Show on CCS Media. And I like to, before I take off, mention a couple of things. I like to talk to you about the fact that we are watching the American election. And the reason why we are watching the American election is because, as we know, America is the superpower. And so with the COVID and with the pandemic and what is happening in this COVID-19, everybody is looking up, wondering what is the next step. The COVID, whether you like it or not, has changed our destiny. A lot of us are trapped in the house. Many airports are not open. Some are beginning to open. Some haven't opened. Some have opened. They are closing back up. We don't know what's happening. The Dow Jones keep dancing up and down. The crude oil keep dancing up and down. Where is the world going? We are watching, we are learning, and we want you to learn alongside with us. So if you come across this video, we would like you to contribute by, contribute or ask a question or even bring topics that you would like us to discuss, and we'll bring professionals. I am just a journalist, and I bring the topics, we bring the expert people like him, a network engineer, a pastor, and also, a computer genius, and a lawyer, a historian. And we bring people like him to bring you the answers that you're looking for. And together we will all dive into this conversation to find out where the world is going. Our next topic is going to be looking at the American election coming up in November the 3rd. We will also be looking at the choice for the Supreme Court and why. We know that, yes, so we will be looking at the Supreme Court. We'll be looking at the pick for the Democratic Vice President, also Kamala Harris. And so we'll be looking at how the election is playing out, and we'll be looking at how this election is going to, positively influence the rest of the world. And so you're watching the Roberta Randolph Show. It's been amazing. Pastor Robert, my guest, and thank you for watching. And with that, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.